Hey guys, welcome back to the GM's table. It's time for another book review, and today I'm reviewing a 5th edition product. By the time this comes out, it'll have been out for about a month, because I'm trying not to put any videos out in August other than the RPG a day videos, which come out every day, and I don't want to flood your guys' feed. So I'm sorry this is late, but I'm actually recording this on August 3rd, so this is heck of a bank. But we're doing the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which is the Eberron setting book. Now, there's a little bit of controversy over this because the Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron is two things that some people are complaining about. The first is it is not Adventurers League legal, and the second is that it is digital only. And I want to talk a little bit about that stuff before I get into the book. Okay, so first of all, it's not Adventurers League legal. Eberron is a totally different power curve. Like, it is dangerous, but it is also pulp. It is actually typically a little more punchy than normal 5th edition. When they run an Eberron campaign for Adventurers League, guys, it's gonna happen eventually. It's too big of a setting. As long as this is, popular and it works, they'll bring back Eberron. I can bet you it will then be legal. Will it be the same book? Personally, I hope you at least get a digital version of the updated book, but there will probably be a print version of that, or they will come out with the campaign, and the campaign will have all the mechanics you really need. That's how it's going to be. Now, I've seen a lot of people go, this basically makes it a $20 Unearthed Arcana. When you look at it on the surface, I get that. It's not Adventurers League legal, so if you only play in Adventurers League games, it's not for you. But if you're only playing in Adventurers League games, you're only playing in the setting that Adventurers League is currently running, so setting books aren't for you. Then the second thing, it's digital only. I am actually a big fan of this for two reasons. I do hope eventually they make a print version, and people have been asking, why can't there at least be a print on demand, which I think is a bit of a price point thing. The first main reason, and another reason I think kind of where the Unearthed Arcana comes up, is the current book is a living document. It will be errated and updated. That's not saying it's incomplete, but it never got play tested like a lot of the 5th edition stuff. Most of Xanathar's Guide came out in Unearthed Arcana. A lot of Volos was monsters and things they'd already been toying with. A good chunk of Mordenkainen's is repackaging monsters from other campaigns and kind of errating and fixing them. I mean, all the big bads from Out of the Abyss are in Mordenkainen's. So there's that, plus it's a lot of lore. Eberron, I feel like, especially with it being their first setting book, they don't know how big it's going to go. Also, not actually their first setting book. I'm going to get into that in just a second. I think it's a bit of a litmus test for settings. Yes, the Magic the Gathering settings coming out in print right away. That's because they're trying to grab the Magic the Gathering fans. While it is connected to D&D, guys, the reason that's in print and not digital is because they want people who are going into game shops and not already following D&D, people who go into game shops to buy their Magic cards, to see the book and buy it. That is the only reason it's print and Eberron isn't. If you want to say this is just an Unearthed Arcana, it's almost 200 pages long. It's a full book. It's not an article. It's not a collection of articles. It's a complete book. I actually really like that they're open about it, like this is a living document. I hope after like a year, or as I said, when the inevitable campaign comes, they'll then go, here's the finalized version. If the PDF's been updated, like in the PDF it says it will be, we'll already have it. And $20 is going to be cheaper than the campaign book. I can guarantee that. So, all that out of the way. A lot of preface because they're doing... Oh, I did want to say it's not the first campaign book and all that. Sorry. Guys, the first, setting book... Sorry, setting, not campaign. The first setting book was Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. Yes, Sword Coast isn't just a setting. Forgotten Realms is the setting, and everything in 5th has been in Forgotten Realms. But the player's handbook actually kind of just glazes over a bunch of settings. It's not like a Forgotten Realms player's handbook, like some of the editions have been very tied to their setting in the core book. Go away, cat. The adventures have been tied to Forgotten Realms, but Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, a lot of people complain because it was mostly lore, mostly fluff, very little mechanics. That's because it was a setting book for the Sword Coast. It didn't sell well. Now, honestly, if you ask me, it's not a very good book. Another way you can tell it didn't sell well is almost half of the class options, aka everything the rogue got, reappeared in Xanathar's. That's not an accident. They like those mechanics, but not a lot of people bought it. And when you're talking about printing a book, especially doing prints on the level Wizards of the Coast does, where it's going to go into basically every game shop, as well as mainstream stores like Barnes & Noble, as well as very large shipments going to Amazon, these are massive print orders. If it doesn't sell well, it's potentially a loss. Whether you like the edition or not, overdoing it on printing books is actually what hurt Wizards of the Coast in 4th edition, constantly putting out hardcover books. So going digital for settings, I really, really love. Again, I hope print on demand comes. If you want to pay an even higher premium price, that's fine. But it would also make the problem of a print on demand, if the PDF's $20, is gonna be $40 to $50. It won't be $30, because print on demand's far more expensive than bulk printing. But you eat all the costs rather than the company. So, all right, that all out of the way, the book itself. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I don't want this to be a super long review, but I love this book, and I'm not big on setting books. This book has everything you need to run Eberron, including an adventure generator, and for the biggest city, random event generators for different levels of the city. And these aren't encounters, these are like RP events and things to make the city feel real and living. I love that. It also gives you everything you need for, I think, like 6 religions, like all the main religions. It goes into all the Dragonmark houses, all of that stuff. Sorry, I got a little indigestion. I'm not feeling great. It goes into all the dragon houses. It covers all the main races. So, with that, if you like Eberron, it's got it. It also has a bunch of new magic items. I still really, really hope this gets a Fantasy Grounds, because at the very least I'm shifting D&D to Fantasy Grounds. Now, again, I don't open the book for you guys, and I've had some people say, oh, well, but I want to look at the art and all that. First of all, if you've seen art for Eberron, you've seen the art in this book, because I know for a fact art's getting recycled. I recognize some of it from the 4th edition book, some from the 3.5. There's a piece of art that's in Xanathar's guide that's in there. It's a lot of recycled art. So I do believe there's new art in there, but I'm not going to go piece by piece and reference them and look them all up. But I noticed right away there is recycled art in the book. However, that kept the cost down, and this book looks professional. It is very well laid out. It is very polished. The art is always fitting. It's a good looking book. One of the things I love is towards the back of the book is you actually have a good, like, high-res image of each of the Dragonmark houses' crests, which is going to be super useful for me. Now, mechanically, there's a few things I want to touch on. First of all, the Warforged. And there's been some discussion about the Warforged. First, they have an ability that basically, in a long rest, they can change their plating and basically go light armor, medium armor, heavy armor. Their light armor counts as unarmored, but if you're proficient in light armor, you get a bonus, and I'm going to talk about that bonus. But before anything, I'm going to say, I don't think this is really broken. It does allow for very high ACs, but if you're talking about people that have builds that they're like, but once they have a +3 shield, well, anyone that can use a shield can potentially have a +3 shield. If you're talking about amulets of protection, anyone can be wearing those. Just looking at the armor. And why that's controversial is Warforged add their proficiency bonus to their AC. Now, the light armor version, if you're not proficient in light armor, you don't get it. If you're proficient in light armor, then you add your proficiency bonus. Okay. Now, heavy armor is 16 plus proficiency bonus. I'm not looking at me. We're going to look at the high end and the low end because that'll give you. Light armor is 11 plus dex plus proficiency bonus. Now, when you compare that, at first I was like, oh my god, this is insane. The other thing is Warforged can't wear armor, which means they can't wear magic armor. Now, the core D&D does not assume magic items will happen too often. We need to remember this is in Eberron. In Eberron, magic is way more common. Magic items are way more common. So building around the assumption that characters will also get magic items, totally fine within that game, within that setting. Looking at the Warforged in a vacuum doesn't work. You gotta look at them in Eberron. Because here's the thing. A Warforged at level 1 has a +2 proficiency bonus. 16 plus 2 is 18. They start with plate armor. Yes, plate armor is very, very expensive. However, I believe it was Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, had a background that let you start with an heirloom that could be any item you want, including plate armor. You can already start with plate armor with a background. I'm not too worried about starting with the equivalent of plate. It's also not magic. The second you find +1 plate, the search for plate doesn't matter anyways. So, get that. Now, on the high end, we're looking at a 16 with a +6 proficiency. This is higher than +3 armor. 16 plus 6, 22. Okay, 6, 6, 12, plus the 10, 22. Okay, that sounds really, really high. And it is. Every point above 20 is very good. But, in theory, we're talking about +6 proficiency bonus. This is endgame. At this point, it's fair to assume the heavy armor guy in the group would get the best armor, which, again, assuming an Eberron is +3. +3 plate is 18 plus 3, which is a 21. At beginning of the game, they have the same AC. If you compare it to what they're likely to be getting at starting, it's one higher than the beginning AC. At end game, it's one higher than the assumed AC. It is not a vast difference. Light armor? Light armor's a little different. Alright, we will assume min-maxi +5 dex bonus at character creation. You can get a 20 dex if you know what you're doing, if you're that kind of player. Sorry if I keep glancing over. I actually have OBS set up to the side. But, alright. In fact, I want to double check. We know it's 11, but I want to double check leather or studded leather real quick. So, yeah, I'm in gear. I just flipped to the wrong page in gear. So, yeah, studded leather is 12 plus dex modifier. Okay, so an average character is going to get 12 plus 5, 17. Again, average. A well-built character that isn't a Warforged, 17 AC. Not counting shields or any of that. Again, anything beyond the armor, anyone can do. Alright, so we got 17. The Warforged is going to get an 11 plus 2 proficiency bonus, 13 plus dex modifier, 18. One higher AC. If you remember, the Unearthed Arcana Warforged originally just had a flat +1 AC that's stacked on top of things. Doing it this way makes them feel different. It sounds really good, but it doesn't shift as much. High end, however, we will look, okay? Because this is where the shift gets a little more. 20th level. 20th level will say rogue, so we're not counting the shield or anything. 20th level rogue, +3 stud leather. Alright, so we got 12 plus 3, 15. Let's say they got the tome that lets you expand your dex to 22, so they have a +6 dex. This is a magic item anyone can get, but for the sake of just armor and natural abilities, we'll include it, even though it's a legendary item. So, we got 12 plus 3, 15, plus 6 dex, 21. The Warforged, they have 11. We'll say plus the 6 dex. We'll give them the same magic item, because fair is fair. So 11 plus 6 dex, 17. Plus 6 proficiency, 23. It's 2 AC higher. Now 2 AC is a 10% difference of being hit. But it's 2 points of AC difference. it sounds way bigger and way more game-breaking than it actually is. When you factor in that this setting assumes magic item bonuses will be there, all of a sudden, the Warforged simply don't worry about finding magic armor. That's it. That's the only... Don't worry about finding magic armor and get anywhere from a +1 to a +2 higher AC than anybody else. They're a freaking robot. Or a golem, technically. I'm fine with that. It's not as breaking as it sounds when you read over it. You gotta think about the larger implications. Now, the thing I do have a bit of a balance issue with, and it's not, oh, I hate it and one's OP, but there's 3 types of Warforged. There's the Envoy, the Titan, and the Scout. The Titan gets +2 strength, his fists deal a d4. I always have an issue with that seeming like something so good, because like if you're doing unarmed, odds are you're a monk, and very quickly the monk's going to outpace that, and that d4 won't matter. And at level 1, they get the d4 anyways, which makes it a moot point. So they can be a fighter that deals d4 with their fist, which is okay. But it also, unarmed strikes, if you're not a monk, aren't finesse. Monks aren't even technically finesse. Like, I've never been a big fan of that getting much weight on it. But they get +2 strength, d4 fists, and like muleback. Basically, they get double carrying capacity, which is cool, but again, it's a mechanic, and this isn't super fair, but it's a mechanic a lot of tables ignore anyways, because encumbrance isn't a huge thing in 5th. The standard rules for armor don't even care about its minimum strength for your armor, to keep things simple. So, +2 strength is a decent amount of weight, because it's to hit and damage and melee, and Warforged should be melee. Or, like, especially a Titan is built for melee, so there's a synergy. I think that's where most of their weight's going. But, okay. And this is, I should note, on top of all the normal Warforged things, because we're comparing the subclasses. I'm not going to give you the full Warforged. Then the Scout basically gets a dex bonus. They get a movement increase of, I think, 5 feet. It might be 10, but I'm like 99% sure it's 5 feet. Again, can't open it because my second screen's my iPad, which is where my book is. And then they get an ability, which is cool, but if they are traveling alone for longer than an hour alone, so they have to be scouting ahead of the party for longer than an hour, they get to stealth at their full pace without penalty. That's it. And, like, that's, in all honesty, guys, that's a ripping ability in a lot of ways. It does have a mechanic to it, but unless you're really focusing, it's not going to come up much. Now, let's compare that to the Envoy. The Envoy is this is the Warforged you're going to choose. Let's just be real honest here. The Envoy is the Warforged you're going to choose. Why? I need to double check. I believe they get +2, +1 bonuses to attributes that they just get to choose, but they might not. Again, I read it last night. I've been dealing with my daughter, so I'm sorry if that's a little off. Even if it doesn't get an attribute bonus, we'll just assume that. I think I'm wrong on that, but we'll just assume it. Because here's what else they get. They get a free skill proficiency, a free tool proficiency, a free language. Okay, sounding pretty good. Then they get integrated tools, and integrated tools is crazy good. Okay? They get to pick one tool they have proficiency in. It doesn't have to be that free tool proficiency. It can be a proficiency from your background or a proficiency from your class, but they get to pick one tool they have proficiency in. It is built into them, and you get to decide how it's built in, but you have to have a free hand to be able to actually use it, which I appreciate. That balances it a little. And they get to double their proficiency bonus with it. I have talked about not all tool proficiencies are created equal. This does mean any class can have expertise thieves tools. Cool, great. Only the rogue can typically do that. That is already really good. If you combine that with Xanathar's, which I know PHB +1 rules, but that's downtime stuff. That's the GM. That depends if the GM is using advanced downtime and crafting rules. For the thieves tools crafting traps, it's insane. But there's a reason thieves tools was the only one. Having expertise in poisoner's kit is amazing. Everything beyond that gets a little less, but disguise kits, That is so good. I love it because it's so open and so flexible. However, the Envoy is just so far better than all the others, than the other two subclass races. Just so much. Like, it's not a joke. That said, I've never been huge on the Titan or the Scout. I mean, they've always interested me as monster stat blocks and things, and I do really like that the Titan and the Scout, you can now be different models of Warforged, and the Envoy is really like hundreds of models you get to like custom make. But the other two need to be bumped up. I don't think the Envoy needs nerfed. I actually really love it. It is very powerful, but it has drawbacks. It has issues. So I'm okay with that. Just the Titan and the Scout need bumped up a bit. Okay, moving on. We also have Changelings. They're basically what you'd expect. I really enjoy them. I'm not getting into all the mechanics. Warforged is the only race I'm going to really get into mechanically. But you have the Changelings. You have the Shifters. I'm actually very interested in how the Shifters work. Shifters I mainly worked with in 4th edition, and mostly they shifted when they were at half health and stuff. Now Shifters choose when to shift. It lasts, I think, a minute. It may be an hour, but I believe it's a minute. And they have to do it once per day. The type of Subrace shifter gives you flat stat bonuses, and typically an always on like flat buff, like maybe keen senses or something. And when you shift, you get a small bump. Every shifter that shifts gets a hit point bump, which I enjoy. It's not temporary hit points, it's just a hit point bump, and then the tougher shifter gets even more of a hit point bump. So shifters are kind of these tough when they go I like to call it going feral. But when they go feral, they get, like, they kind of just bounce back and then go back in. It's very, very cool. It also means they didn't go with the whole bloodied thing, because bloody isn't really a thing in 5th. But it wouldn't be good to shift if you're at full health, because you gain hit points. I don't believe it raises your maximum. So you do want to take some damage, then shift, which harkens back to that bloody mechanic from last edition, and all that stuff. So there's some stuff I really enjoy in the Shifters. They also have, I'm so sorry, my mind just blanked, but there's a race of humans who made a deal with beings from the Dream Realm. They're the closest psionics we're getting. There is no psionic class. In fact, I will say, in the Eberron book currently, I do say currently, it's a living book, there's no classes. And we're going to get to Artificer, don't worry. But there is no classes, so there's no psionic classes. But there is a race that is naturally psionic, and they get some telepathy. They can telepathically communicate with anyone else. They can spend a bonus action to let that person respond, which means they can send messages, and you can't respond if they don't want you to. They have to open their mind back up. I actually really like that in a dynamic. Also, bonus actions, with the exception of a few classes, don't really get used, so okay. Classes or builds, I should say. There's some fighters that are bonus action heavy. But it's interesting. It's not massively overpowered. It's not a full psionics. If you're looking for full psionics, they're still working on it. I can tell you that. Just psionics weren't ready. Moving on, when I said there's no Artificer, well, this merges in with the Dragonmarks. People were expecting Dragonmarks to be feats. That's how they were in Unearthed Arcana. Dragonmarks are now a sub-race. And races who don't have a sub-race, they tell you what abilities you remove to instead gain your Dragonmark. I actually love this. I can already tell some people are going to be like, oh, this is awful. I can't be a high elf with a Dragonmark. No, you're an elf from one very specific lineage. Therefore, it's racial. Dragonmarks were always tied to bloodline, so it makes sense that it's racial. I actually really love this inclusion. I'm not going into all the Dragonmarks, but that is key. Dragonmarks are sub-races. Now, as I said, there's no Artificer. However, if you want to be an Artificer, be a human. Because the Mark of Making is only available to humans, and the Mark of Making is the Artificer as of right now. They get the ability that when you saw the Unearthed Arcana, they've had the Artificer twice. I think both of the versions, because there was the Artificer class, and then they tried the Artificer as a specialization to the Wizard. Now, it's basically Mark of Making is your Artificer. Because that whole, both of them had that ability where you could just give a magical +1 to a weapon or a piece of armor, and it's kind of this temporary, and you got to keep doing it to the one if you want to be, so you can't just keep manufacturing. Okay, they have that. They also have something I find really, really interesting. They can pick any wizard cantrip and tie it to an item. They can only have one item like this at a time, but they can make a cantrip, tie it to an item, then someone can use that item to cast the cantrip. They can just make minor magic items. I think that's a lot of fun. It essentially means as long as they swap it out, they have access to every wizard cantrip, which is kind of big. Since it's a sub-race, they don't need to be a wizard. So you can make more interesting combos and stuff without worrying about the multi-classing. I've said how I feel about multi-classing, and I think this doubles down on that. You don't need to. I don't think you have to be a dwarf to be a Forged Domain Cleric. Again, this actually synergizes really well with Xanathar. So you could be a Forged Domain Cleric that also has the Mark of Making and just be, I got some issues with the Forged Domain Cleric. I think some of those numbers need tweaked. But in Xanathar's, it's not printed yet, so it can be tweaked on their end and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually classes get added. This book is mainly written by the guy who made the Eberron setting. There's a lot of care in this book. On top of that, as I said, this has everything you need for Eberron. This has all the information on Eberron. It goes into some deep information on many of the cities. It's much less dense on the rest of the world, but it covers the entire world map. It gives you everything you need. As I said, there's a very quick adventure generator if you need quick adventures. And the adventure generator is designed in a way where they give you a general thing, and then next to it in brackets, they give you, if it's tied to like an NPC, they give you a specific NPC that this would qualify to. So really, you could use it as a general one, but if you want everything tied to Eberron and really feel Eberron, the generator is already built for that quickly. Guys, for $20, D&D books aren't cheap. D&D books are some of the most premium priced RPG books, all right? Once you're on Amazon, some things get cheaper, but $20 for a brand new book is not a bad price, and this is a full book. This is a complete book. This is a book I walked away very impressed with. So with that, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff, do all that iTunes stuff, do all that Stitcher stuff. We're kind of going everywhere now. And I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.